meeting to order and welcome the guests and committee members that are in attendance today. Commissioner Louis Alford, Mylan Blake, Bill Winters, Tom Cry, and then various members from the Board of Education are in our audience, along with Lori Moultrie. So our first item of business is to approve the October 3rd, 2024 minutes, and they're found on pages 2 through 4 in your packet. So if you'll look at those, and then I would entertain a motion to approve and look for a second. I have a motion from Commissioner Alford. Do I have a second? A second from Commissioner Winters. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. One absent. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Education Freedom Act of 2025. And before I turn it over to Dr. Cash, I just have some personal comments of my own that I would like to share about the Education Freedom Act. Using taxpayer money for private school vouchers is a controversial topic with several arguments against it. And here are my reasons, or a few key reasons why I believe it to be a bad idea. Number one, it diverts funds from public schools. Voucher programs often pull funds from public school budgets, which can weaken public schools' ability to serve the majority of the students, especially in those underfunded or rural districts. Public schools are mandated to serve all students, including those with disability or behavioral challenges, while private schools can selectively choose who they admit as their students. Number two, I believe there's a lack of accountability. Private schools are not subject to the same level of oversight, transparency, and standardized testing requirements as public schools. Taxpayer money may be spent without clear measures of effectiveness or equity. Number three, inequity in access. Vouchers often do not cover the full cost of private school tuition, leaving low-income families unable to afford private schools even with vouchers. This can lead to an additional educational inequalities. Rural areas typically have fewer private school options, leaving residents with no meaningful benefit from the voucher program. Number four, potential for discrimination. Private schools are not always required to follow the same anti-discrimination laws as public schools. This means they may deny admission based on religion, sexual orientation, disability, or other factors. Number five, I believe it undermines public education as a public good. Public education is a cornerstone of democracy aimed at providing equal opportunity and fostering civic responsibility. Diverting funds to private schools may erode public support and the foundational purpose of public education. Number six, there seems to be a mixed evidence on outcomes. Research shows mixed results on whether voucher programs improve academic outcomes. Some studies indicate no significant academic gains for students using vouchers, and others show declines in performance in key subjects like math and reading. Number seven, separation of church and state concerns. Many private schools are religiously affiliated, raising concerns about whether public funds are being used to support specific religious teachings, potentially violating constitutional principles. And number eight, administrative cost. Voucher programs can be expensive to administer, diverting even more money from classrooms to bureaucratic processes. While proponents argue that vouchers offer choice and competition, critics often highlight these risks and emphasize the need to strengthen public education rather than divert resources away from it. So those are just a few of my thoughts before I turn it over to Dr. Cash.
the current those that are currently in private schools that this would become available for if those first 20,000 were slots were not used would cost the state of Tennessee over $177 million. That would be recurring expenses. My point is, I think this is a missed opportunity to invest more funds in public education, whether it is pushed down to educators for salaries, whether it is pushed to districts for infrastructure needs. We all know how expensive it is to maintain buildings, so I think there is better use of public funds than pushing it to private schools. I also firmly believe that it will not serve those of the highest need, that it will be catered to those who can already afford this. And so those are my oppositions. Plus, I'm such a proponent of what the public schools provide and what we do. We say all means all. We don't turn students away that have a different demographic or a different need. We serve all of them, and private schools have the option of turning those students down. So I don't think you can call this apples to apples. I would also point out that if you took the same demographics for any kind of testing in private schools versus public schools, then you're doing demographic to demographic. My belief is public schools would fare higher, not lower. But if you take those scores at the whole, where we serve all students, students with high needs, students who excel, we serve them all. Private schools do not. And so you can't compare it apples to apples. But if you did and you took the same demographics from private and pulled those demographics out of the public schools, I truly believe the public schools would stand firm and stand higher. There are several things in this bill that I'm sure you have questions about. I'll be glad to vet them. Again, I am speaking on my behalf. I do represent the board. The board has already sent a letter stating their concerns with this bill. So I just want everybody to know public schools are truly, repeating what Commissioner Slater, the foundation of our societies. They are the economic drive. They are why people come to schools, and they are the center operations of most small towns. Whether it is athletics or other factors, academics, parents are proud of their schools and want to be present. And I would just hope that the whole community would know and understand the language about freedom of choice. Uh, there are all kinds of choices out there now for parents, and those that have the financial means already are using that option. Um, there's nothing in this bill that allows students to have to already been in a public school or registered to a public school. They can go straight from whatever the parent chooses, and which I firmly believe public schools are the option that parents need to take. And I'm open to any questions, anything you want to ask about the bill. I'll be glad to answer those.
Okay. Commissioner Blake?
First, I want to thank you for having this, calling this meeting. Talking about this. I'm sorry. Again, thank you for having this meeting. When I was talking about this, I guess back in December, and there was a laundry list, I thought best not to engage the full commission, but bring this to an education committee. So I do appreciate you doing that. I did read the letter from the board, Dr. Cash, and I applaud the board and yourself for drafting that and passing that. And I believe it has been received by our legislative bodies. In fact,
Yes.
they said they have received it.
Yes.
And they would reply to us. So it'd be interesting to see their response to that. So that's good. I just speak for myself. I have tried to be open-minded to hear the other side, and I think that's fair. We would all, and I honestly can sit here and look at everybody in this room and video land. I haven't heard anything. I just kind of what you just said. So I'm gonna be interested in hearing the arguments and the debates in the next couple of weeks. I'll stay open-minded, but as Commissioner Slater, those were well spoken as to why this is not a good idea for the state of Tennessee and Bradley County and the city of Cleveland. The other thing in the bill, there's one thing in there. I guess we'll go straight to that because this sums up a lot of it to me. On page 12, item B and part of C, but you can go ahead and call it all C, and I'll read it real quick. The creation of the Education Freedom scholarship program does not expand the regulatory authority of this state, the officers of this state, or the authority of any LEA. LEA is basically school boards throughout the state, for those who don't know, of any LEA to impose any rules, regulations, or requirements on private schools that enroll recipients beyond the rules narrowly tailored to enforce the requirements of this program. Private schools that enroll recipients must have the maximum freedom to provide for the educational needs of recipients without government control. And that's the meat of it that goes on to say. Correct me if I'm wrong, you've been doing this for a couple of days, we'll say that. The
Well,
freedom,
thank you.
I think it's fair to say that the state is, they have a constitutional, you read the Constitution, they have a constitutional obligation to fund education, it's in there. But there's more laws governing education than pretty much any other, transportation, all these other stuff. I mean, do you feel like that's, I guess, fair? I'll say, I'm not probably phrasing my question, but when I read that, the private schools that enroll recipients must have the maximum freedom to provide the education need of recipients without government control. But that's not fair because they have tons of controls for you guys. I'm probably not saying put my question correct, but hopefully you get what I'm trying to prove.
Interestingly, when you look at the accountability that is placed on public school systems and the public display of all of that, any private institution receiving these funds, if passed, which we hope that our legislators stand up and do not pass this, are not scrutinized, nor is it reported in the way that public schools are. So the lack of accountability and the lack of transparency about how the funding's being used and where it's going is quite disturbing. We have so many rules and regs, not only just in the operations side of the instructional side of it, but the accounting side of it, how we spend the money, where it goes. We are heavily audited with every penny, and there are rules from the state, rules from the federal government, all coming into public schools that the private schools would not have to abide by in any way. So I don't know how anyone could sit there and say that they fare better or they fare worse. If you're looking at, parent satisfaction, again, where did those polling numbers come from? Who did they poll? And if you polled public school families right now, the vast majority of them are satisfied. So if that's what we're looking at for accountability is parent satisfaction, then let's play it both ways. But you are absolutely right. The private schools are not scrutinized, nor do they have the accountability that we are. And this obviously says they still would not.
That's what gets me is it's written that
Yep.
they're tying their own hands, and I mean they even regulate how you do field trips. I mean,
Yes.
to that extent. Well, the other thing, Chairman Slater, is I had the city school board met this past Monday, and I believe they chatted with it, and they had someone, an observer, I guess that was told. I was talking to them this morning, and in Hamilton County, I guess has some type of voucher system,
Yes.
and the feedback that the city school board got from that particular person was that this is not good. And in fact, the state's not listening to any of their feedback or anything like that. So in the few cases that we are piloting this or whatever, the results or the feedback has not been very good. So I just think that's all very interesting in the sense that those of us who do not feel like this is the right direction to go have given our honest to God feedback and been open-minded, and hopefully it doesn't fall on deaf ears. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank
And,
you. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Blake, I would also like to add very definitely that the programs that are already in effect have only been in effect for 2 years. The results from those academic results have not been positive. They are not higher than public schools. So my point is you do a pilot to study and find out what works and what does not work. And the pilots are not showing the success rates that they hoped. So if I in any way was in support, I would be in support of take what you already have expand that and see, over 5 years, 6 years, so that you can see a longitudinal look at the academic side of it. We don't need to be adding more, and we definitely don't need to get the state involved in, a recurring budget of minimum 177 million annually for parents that are already in public school, in private schools. I also am with you. I'm not hearing an outcry from the communities for this to happen. It seems to be entities that are outside the state of Tennessee that are pushing this. So, my question to those who are in favor are, in your communities that you represent, and I'm talking to the legislatures, what are the voices that you're hearing? And I think those are the ones that they need to be listening to.
Well said. Thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner
Sure.
Winters?
Um, I've been in private school. I graduated from a private school. I've worked with private schools. I understand that the need for private schools is monetarily in many ways. I think this situation for me, and I've worked in public schools and enjoyed every minute of it. I think timing is everything in life, and all these ideas are out there, but I don't think the time is now. I think time is on our side. Of course, in Bradley County, we have a great school system. We don't have. I do know the TCPSs of the world and others are looking at opportunities to have input of funding, but the data that they're going to have to contribute to the state continually, I think, will nullify what funding institutions like that will have to deal with. I think timing is everything, and the timing in this, you can't keep pushing something like this and it's not be received by those out there that are in the workplace and those that are doing the jobs in both areas. I think timing, as was stated, maybe it should be longitudinally reviewed. What's happening in the systems that are local districts that are experiencing this, and see how it works in 4 years, 3 years down the road. The other concern I have, we have a 3-year plan ourselves here. We have a $15.1 million plan for buildings. Now, our fellow administrators in other commissioners in other districts will have this same problem. It's how we planned for 3, 4, 5 years down the road for the occupants of our students. We're planning for great growth here. That growth will be happening, but we need to have that great growth prepared for our funding. And then all at once, this opportunity comes out, and we lose a third of students. I think that's where time is of the best setting, that we take time on this. And I know there are people that are zealous about this. Sure, one or two of our legislators are, but I think you don't want to push on this and it happen, and it'd be a catastrophe for school systems and for private schools that are undermanned at this point to bring an administrative team on to accommodate what the state requires. So for me, and I'm also, I spent 12 years on the school board. I served as chair 3 times. I had to come in this building and assert the fact that we were responsible for the schools, and the commission is responsible to fund us and move forward, but we have the decision to make what's best within the schools. So I think when the final thing for me is if majority of the school board, with our superintendent vehemently opposed to this at this point, I have to be a no in moving forward in this. I think time is of the essence to do what we're doing and do the good work in Bradley County. We need these 3 schools done, and the $15.1 million is committed. The population shifts are out there, and we see it all happening. So time will tell, as far as I'm concerned, whether we need to go this way, but I would not go forward with this. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner Winters, one of the pieces that I think are out there that are not being mentioned is 90% of the districts within the state of Tennessee have 1 or less private schools in them. And in looking at that and looking at we should be serving the least of them, not the ones that have the means, I venture to say when I read this, there are no guidelines or rules around establishing private schools or what the expectation is for establishment. I know when I looked at the Florida legislation, there are very strict guidelines about being financially solvent and responsible for you. It was brick and mortar. So I think I think this plan does not address that as well. That you are throwing this out there, but there's no guardrails around it, nor are there any true financial guardrails. And they can say that there's only 20,000, but the plan is to increase that. And if that 20,000 is not taken up by underprivileged kids that are economically disadvantaged, it opens up to everyone, no matter what the income level is. That's another concern for me.
So are there other comments? Okay, so Dr. Cash, what are your next steps? Or are you looking for something from this body or?
I would request that the Bradley County Commission, the funding body in support of the public schools, that you get together and you develop a letter based. Actually, we did it last year from the financial standpoint and from the outlook of we are not, whether you are or not. I don't think you are, but with the job of supporting the public school system. And I think there's something in here about sustainability of current funds, but it's also in there based on availability of funds. So that is not a guarantee. I would like to see something from the commission as the funding body to say and believe that you believe in our public school systems, and if the state does have money to spend on education, it should be back in the public school systems.
Okay. So Lori, do we need to take that as a motion and vote on that? Or, okay. So per Dr. Cash's request for us to draft a letter and provide to the state, do I have someone that'd be willing to make that motion? Okay. And I have a second? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? So Dr. Cash, will you be speaking in Nashville?
I will. I'm not sure how popular I am in Nashville right now.
Not popularity.
But yes, if I have that opportunity, I do want you to know that the push, that's the only way I can say it, to get legislatures to vote in favor of this is something I've not witnessed before, which to me is another red flag. I think that you have representatives that, for the most part, are listening to our constituents. I'm hoping that everyone else does as well. We did send the board letter to our legislatures. It will go out to those education chairs next week as they go back into session, so that they will have that too. And I am consistently talking to legislatures and not telling them yes or no, just saying these are my concerns. These are the school board's concerns. What about this? What about this? And the things that Chairman Slater, that you brought up are excellent. And if I could, I would love to have a copy of that.
Okay.
Not to say that it's in your name, but it just guides me to say, have you looked at these things?
Okay. I'll send it to Lori and have her send it. Lori, can we add that to the agenda for Monday? Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other comments from anyone in the audience about vouchers or anything before we move, Commissioner Alford?
We're gonna send the letter just to our representatives, or we're gonna send it to the people you talking about a minute ago? If we're gonna send it to more than just our reps,
Yeah.
we probably need a list of those folks so that Lori can address it
Commissioner Alford,
appropriately.
I would be honored to provide those for you. I think the more voices and elected bodies that these legislatures hear from, the better it is. And I will send you, I'll send Lori a list in the context of all those education chairs, and make sure that you get those, because that Lori will have those to send. I think that's important. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, because I think our representatives are pretty well
Yeah.
familiar way we feel.
Yes,
But
sir.
I'm not sure about the other committee members and
And
the legislation part.
And I hope your action is a catalyst for other funding bodies, whether it be city or county, follow suit, because we all know if the funding starts to decrease that's coming from the state, then it is the local funding bodies that have to begin to look at how much more do the schools need, and I don't want to see that shift. They are by constitutional law required to support public schools.
All right, item B, fiscal year 2024-2025 fund balance expenditures. And I don't really know where you want to start with this. If Susan, if you want to share your document first, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. So I was asked to speak on the reserve and the fund balance, which I'm more than happy to do. And I'm just going to go through this PowerPoint that I've kind of tweaked it over the years because obviously we have this question a lot, and it is quite confusing when you're trying to compare the CAFR to what we've given you. So I've tried to break it down. Hopefully it will make sense. So the CAFR that you've referred to is showing a $16,304,633 balance as of June 30th. Our undesignated fund balance as of July 1, 2024 is $13,327,266. That leaves you a difference of almost $3 million. Why would that be? One thing to remember is that the CAFR Comprehensive Annual Financial Report on page 183 lists a fund balance line that is all-inclusive, and that's super important to remember. However, the CAFR also includes a balance sheet on page 176 that separates the fund balance into restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. Now, that unassigned on the CAFR is what we call undesignated. When we speak to the board and or the commission in reference to our fund balance, we are referring to the undesignated fund balance. Okay, so let's break those numbers down. First, let's break down the $3 million difference between what the CAFR shows and what we gave you. They are considered designated fund balances. And what's important to remember about that is that means the use cannot be changed. So that is not money that we are free to allocate for any other purpose. So if you look at the first line, our prior year encumbrances, what that means is, that means at the end of the year, there were open purchase orders that we could not close yet, but they hit our books, okay? So the $662,163 is what was in our prior year encumbrances at year end. Line 2, and what I did, we detail it out per line, but because the CAFR combines some of these, I tried to put it in the same bucket the CAFR did so that you can line them up. So in this line, restricted for career ladder and our SPED 10 care, if you notice multi-year is beside many of these, and I just want to explain what that is because these numbers are typically rise every year. Multi-year just means it's a running balance, okay? So, for instance, career ladder is pretty much going to stay the same every year. It will go down. We're almost through with career ladder. But SPED 10 care, if they don't spend it all, if they don't put it back in the budget this year and spend it all, they're going to still earn more 10 care. So next year, that number is probably going to go up. But again, it is not money that we can use for any other purpose. If you go to line 3, restricted TCRS stabilization, this is held at the state. This is an entry that they give us to make into the books. And let me explain a little bit about what this is. Several years ago when the county adopted the hybrid program retirement for anyone that was hired like after October 1 of 16, they went into a hybrid program. And so what happens is we have that with classified and certified. The state also adopted that for certified employees. What that means is they're trying to keep everything solvent at the state. And so for legacy people, they adjust that rate based on many things. It's like an actuarial formula. It's based on how many people are going to retire and when they're going to retire and how much money's in there to pay all of that, because that's a liability. Well, when hybrid came along, they're thinking, how can we make this where we never have to go back and revisit it? So right now, we're paying in 4% on everybody that was hired after July 1 if it's certified, after October 1, 2016 if it was classified. So they do our little actuarial thing, but keep in mind, all these people that are being hired on the hybrid plan are new young teachers. So we got 30 years to work up enough money to pay their retirement. So what they decided to do, they said, we're going to charge 9% retirement. 5 of that's going to go into a 401k program. 4 of that's going to go into TCRS. But when you're starting out and you've got all of these people that are not going to retire for 30 years, you didn't need 4%. So they come up with the number we actually needed. So let's say that I think 1 year it was 1.4%. So what we sent to TCRS was 1.4% for TCRS retirement. But then they opened this account called a stabilization reserve. And what that's for, it's almost like a stabilization number. We always pay 4%, but only the actuary amount goes into the TCRS bucket, and then the stabilization goes into another bucket. That's what this is. This number is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because nobody's going to be drawing from it for a long time. So this number that says $1.7 million, next year you can refer back to this and say, oh, she told me this was going to go up. Because they give us an entry every year. Like out of that 1.7, I think 300,000 of that 1.7 was actually for 2024, FY 2024. But it's already been, so we've been dumping into it all this time. It's built up to 1.7. So that number's never going to go away, and it's never a number we're going to be able to touch. Does that make sense? Okay, then we have committed for education and for operations. And the education part is honor choir, and the operations part is nurse teen care. So this is the offsetting kind of the SPED teen care, but we keep up with it separately. So that's what's in those. Both of those are multi-year, so they're a running total. Okay.
Before she continues?
Yes, sir. So there are certain, and somebody may have to help me out with this, but there are certain services that we do with our children that you can actually file teen care on. And if they pay us, that's where this goes. And there's from what I can gather from the nurse manager, there is a lot of paperwork and a lot of liability in that situation. And so we actually get paid on some of that. SPED's the same way. And we happen to have the SPED person here today that could comment on what workload that adds. So what has been happening in the past few years is that the nurse manager has requested a stipend for the nurses for the additional work this has added to their load. But as you can see, it's still got quite a hefty balance in there. Okay, so that explains the difference between the CAFR number and the $13 million, that $3 million, that's where it's at. Okay, now let's go into the part that we do have a choice in how we spend it. And that started out at like $13,327,266. And so I thought this might be helpful to you. I hope it is. I actually, Ellen pulled them for me. But I actually wanted to list what amendments you've approved this year that adds up to the amount that we're showing has already been allocated, okay? So, Amendment 2, and this is our number. I'm not sure that translates to y'all, but it is to move the Spark grant out of the reserve. That hits fund balance, $47,222. This is the biggie. This is the one that y'all are going to be most interested in. Amendment number 4 was to move capital outlay projects for 177. That includes the Bradley Central High Vestibule, the OMS CDC wing, the Parkview Addition, and the Bradley Central High School Science Wing. So we have already moved $5,292,033 out of 141. It is sitting in 177 to fund those projects listed. Amendment 10 was to move the safety reserve and the public school security grant budget into where we could spend it, and that was $60,000. Amendment 24 transferred FY24 technology reserve to the PI AVL project. That was $49,567. Now, those all came off the fund balance. The next two actually added on to the fund balance. I'll explain that in a second. But we voided prior year checks, and the only way that we can get it out is to affect fund balance. So it was $1,202. And then adjustments to designated fund balance lines through December 31st. All of this I'm mentioning now is the difference of what you're seeing on July 1 to where we sit today or the end of December. This goes through the end of December. But the adjustments on the designated fund balance, all those things that I told you we couldn't change the use of, if they're in a reserve, we still have to hit fund balance to get them back in the budget. So that's what that $168,123 is. But actually, those last two items increase the fund balance. So our current undesignated fund balance as of December 31st is $8,047,769. And my screens were a little busy, so I just kind of repeated that, so it just kind of nails it in our brain that our current undesignated fund balance as the amended budget in December, $8,047,769, which equates to 6.87% of an $117,170,839 budget. Okay, that's our amended budget for the year. And all I do is take the $8 million and divide it by that number, and that's where I get the 6.87%. Does anybody have any questions on that before I move on? I've got one more slide, and then I'll be finished.
Go ahead and finish and then
Okay. Well, I only added this because I had been asked this so many times. I presented this to the board, and it seemed to really, resonate with them, so I'm hoping that it will with you. But the other question I receive often is why we feel it's necessary to keep such a large fund balance. So I just put down, here's our numbers. 3% fund balance is required by the state, and that equates to $3,515,125. 5% is required by the county body. That is $5,858,542. Dr. Cash, and my recommendation has always been that sweet spot of about 7%, and that is $8,201,959. Why? Because one general purpose payroll average is $7,222,941. That is only general purpose payroll. And I don't know that I've talked to this body before about this, but I've talked to others, and I think it's worth repeating. If something were to happen, let's say that E-Plan was down and we were not going to get our funding, and we had to cover payroll for a month. This is only covering GPS payroll. But if you think about it, if something catastrophic like that happened, we would also be on the hook to pay federal employees and food service employees. We would have to cover whatever had to be covered to make sure our people got paid till we got reimbursed. So this is a very, very conservative number. That would not be everything it would cost us if something like that happened. And that would only cover one payroll. Most training from the state comptroller's office recommends, they don't require, but they recommend 1 to 2 months of operating expenditures to be held in our fund balance. That would be around $19.5 million for 2 months. We feel pretty good about $8 million, but that is why we don't feel that's an excessive number. because 2 months would be more like 20 million, not 8. So that's kind of where we come up with that sweet spot of close to 7% of our annual budget. Okay, and that's all I have.
Commissioner Alford?
You mentioned the 7 million problem, we'll say, catastrophe, where you had to close down or something. Since Bradley schools have been open in 1800 and something, I guess, has that ever happened?
It's not happened as a whole. We did have it happen through E-Plan one year that we were
1 year,
sweating
yeah.
it coming, but it did get there in time. So I can't say it has ever happened, but I can say the recommendation from the comptroller's office is to have 2 months of your expenditures where you can get to it
I
if you
don't-
had to.
I don't
So that
underst-
to me tells me that that we're not the only ones thinking something could.
I don't quite understand when the state only requires 3%, but the comptroller says 1 or 2 months.
I don't know. I can't tell you that either. I have wondered why, if it's that important, that it's not required. And it may be just that let me tell you, Bradley County is a very blessed county. And there are a lot of places that wouldn't even be an option. And I can go, I was thinking about, as I drawing into my career, I was thinking about all the things all the decisions that's been made by the commission and by the board. And sometimes these same questions were asked. But I could probably mention, and I couldn't do it off the top of my head like this, but I bet you I could come up with a list of 8 or 10 times when this has been critical for Bradley County, the fact that we have been conservative. And the one that always comes to mind for me is when COVID hit. And the reason that we are a one-to-one initiative today is purely because we had money that we could do matches with the state. Other districts were not able to use any of that money because they had no money to put with it. So I will stand proudly and take a hit over that. I don't make the decision, and if I were told to spend it, obviously that's exactly what we would do. I can only give my best recommendation, and I feel very proud of what we've done in the last 10 years with being stewards of our budget.
Commissioner Blake?
Thank you. Real quick, the school fund, I always think of 141 is your main one, but you have others. Do they have fund balance requirements as well? Can't remember. You got the
Let's see.
177 and
Well, you can't carry a fund balance in federal, correct?
but there no requirement per se from
Right.
state or us, right? It's self-imposed, so to speak. But I guess
Yes.
the number that you're referring to is just the general, the 141.
I tried to keep that way because that's how you can, if you need to check me, you'll be able to go back to a report and check me. So I tried to keep it where you could do that.
The reason I asked is you got 177 now, where you're going to use, I guess, is your capital projects, and what you pulled money for out of your undesignated fund balance was for capital projects.
We had to
Transfer it. So the amendments went from 141 to
Mhm.
177.
And yes.
Okay.
And I believe Ellen's going to come up and detail what those projects are and what money is sitting there for them.
So these are amendments that came to the full commission via the finance committee since July 1. So
Correct.
after the budget was passed through resolution, then amendments start coming, and those were there.
Yes,
So
sir.
when you're creating or you're working on your budget request or your budget proposal, how do you take into account your fund balance at that point? So you have an undesignated fund balance in your prior budget. You have an amount. Those are taught us well. Those are projections,
Correct.
but you're getting close to quasi actual.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle the undesignated fund balance amount
To budget for the next
in
year?
the budget that you're proposing?
We've done it different ways, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes if we know exactly what we're gonna use it for, we'll go ahead and use that fund balance in the original budget proposal. When we're looking at it, there's a couple of things that happen. We're not just looking at the fund balance where it sits at that point on our reports, but we're also having to go and look at all of our revenue projections and expenditure projections
that-
to see how much we think will grow our fund balance, okay? So it's not anywhere we can look except we're going through making adjustments. We come up with a figure, and let's say, I'm gonna say a good number, if you look back through the years that I've been doing it, is about $4 million, $3 to $4 million, because we typically, until this year, we typically come in a little over on revenue and a little over on expenditures. And if you look historically, they say that if you're budgeting conservatively, but realistically as well, if you have no major mishaps through the year, you can expect, you should plan on most of your line items coming in about 2% under what you projected. Because that gives you enough cushion that if something bad happens, you've got money there that you can use. That's why we grow it as much as we do. But if we think we're going to grow it 4 million, we get with the board, we get with Dr. Cash, we have all the needs, and then we decide how much of that fund balance are we going to use. And sometimes by doing that, we have fallen below the 3% on the budget document, because see, we're sending that to you in April or May when it's not real numbers. It's a budget. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and that kind of answers the question of where I was getting at, is that there are certain quote-unquote projects that you do budget because you know you've got the money, and that's in your budget proposal. And then there's the ones, I guess, that you're waiting to see what happens is from a funding point of view to see if the project takes
Correct.
place.
Right.
And that's when you send over an amendment.
Right. And a good, a good rule of thumb, it's not always the truth, but good rule of thumb is for capital projects, we like to use one-time money, and that's the fund balance money. But if you notice on the things we wait on are things like raises or bonuses, because we don't like to use fund balance money for that. We like to use new money, recurring money for that. So sometimes we're waiting to see what that July final is on our T's or our BP to know, can we do more on salaries and benefits? Because we don't want to use fund balance money because that's fixed. We can't do anything about that.
And that's very good. So the projects that you have listed here, we've amended the undesignated fund balance. They're in the expense lines, and your projects are green light to go. And it'll take whatever amount of time to get them done. But the money has quote unquote been earmarked or appropriated, whatever fancy word you want to use. So when you get to your next budget, which we're getting ready to start here in a couple of weeks, you'll look at those new projects that you want to use your undesignated fund balance, put those in your budget request or your budget proposal. And what about the ones who have to carry on to the next year?
Well, I was going to say there will be some projects that you're about to hear about that we don't have them fully funded.
So it really is just a priority
It
of
really
what projects,
is, yes. And
which
well, and
ones
it's
you want to
making
fund
sure
first and which ones you want to fund
what
second.
I think
and
it
so
does,
forth.
it cleans it up for you and the board and for us. When we can move those projects over here, then it's not looking like we've got $16 million.
Right.
We don't, because it's already being earmarked for these projects. That makes sense?
It does, and so we're kind of talking to ourselves here. This is where the commission and the school board and Dr. Cash and yourself and Ellen, all that, if we have, just call it maybe a different opinion, or we just have different ideas, and we want to communicate those during the budget process is the time to do it.
Correct.
Because that's the catalyst that sets everything in motion afterwards. The priorities, what gets funded and all that, and then what's recurring and what's non-recurring.
Right. The
You guys
first
did-
step.
You guys were good, and I agreed with it because was the 1% increase after the budget. We did that through an amendment, right? Well, that obviously will be recurring that you'll
That's
have
right.
to take care of in this
Correct.
coming up budget.
Correct.
Very good.
That's, and the first step in our budget cycle is that we send out paperwork to our board, asking them to prioritize what is their number of, I think there's 4 lines, of course they can add to it, but they usually fill out, here's my 1, 2, 3 top priorities for the budget. And that's where we start.
I guess the only other question is probably a little bit long-winded is, what priorities do you still have that have not been funded, that are like in the,
Well,
in
look
the, in
at-
the, in the
Is it
queue?
okay to,
It is, but Madam Chair, may I interrupt?
Sure.
One of the biggest priorities that we're still looking at, of course, that we'll have to work with the commission on is the building of new schools. So with our conservative numbers and trying to take care of as much as we could, which would be the vestibule, Pie Center, Biztown, AVL, Ocoee Middle, Parkview, and working with you on the wing, we're trying to be sure we really are doing our due diligence to take care of as much of the smaller things as we can, so that when we have to build schools and things, we're all in line. But we're going to have to build new schools, and so that's where it takes us all working together.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So the last question, I promise, is one of the amendments, I believe it came through, and I'm going by memory, which I should never do, but is that you had 1 million or 1.5 for the purchase of land, but that's not in here, so.
well, we only listed
But
the
that was-
ones
that was a
that
mi-
affected fund balance.
That was a-
Because I was trying to balance it.
But it did come from an undesignated fund balance.
But the land money was moved from the OMS project, so it didn't hit fund balance. It was just a movement. Does that make sense?
Okay, so
It is in here.
it is in here, okay.
It just,
So
I only used the numbers that affected fund balance, so you'd be able to balance
I just
that.
remember seeing it in one of your
Yep.
amendments, so thank you, Madam Chair.
It's, actually Amendment 24, Mylan. It's the one where I listed,
Oh,
on the PowerPoint, it's the 49,566.62.
and
Because that's the only number that hit the fund balance, but the 500,000 was transferred.
so on that, so the purchase of land has been funded completely, right? If I remember correctly, it's 1.5 million that was amended, and you had to use some of the money that you had already budgeted.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Ellen?
So this last slide just kind of highlights the current projects in Fund 177 and where we stand on funding those. This is the budget as it stands for December 31st. So we've got Hopewell, the project has been started. That is being funded out of Fund 189. Reimbursements have started to flow from Fund 189 in December. So we're holding a little bit of money there just to pay the bills and be reimbursed. We have the Bradley vestibule that has been funded at the $610,000. We are finishing up a project at the Pie Center for the audio, visual, and lighting equipment. That will be done hopefully before June 30th this year. That's the majority of that 661 that's left. We have funded Ocoee Middle School in that project. Corbett and Kyle will be giving a update on that. Parkview, as Susan referenced, is the one that is currently partially funded. We think there's going to be about 6 months left to fund once we get that bid process back. We think we will have about 1 to 2 fiscal years to get that last 6 months fully funded. And then we are anticipating the Science Wing FEMA grant coming through, and we are aware that we have a local match, and we believe our local match will be about the $3 million.
So any questions about Commissioner Alford?
Speaking of the science wing, what's the status of it? Do you know anything other than that's something that's been sitting there how many years now?
2,
So that will
Going on 3.
transition great into
Corbett.
Corbett.
So before Corbin starts, Susan, thank you for putting this together. This explains, this will be a document that each of us should keep to reference back to. It's a great explanation tool. Thank you for putting this together. Yeah. Corbin, we'll go on to item C, projected capital expenditures for 25 and 26.
Thank you for the opportunity to give you an update. You'll see the same slides as from October, but just provided some updates in red here. The January update on the Science Wing expansion, FEMA has completed their review, all the technical reviews. They've checked all the boxes, and everything's been pushed to the legislators, the Tennessee congressmen, to now put their final buttons. So we're anticipating that to be funded soon. But the bureaucratic steps are completed at this point. It's up to the elected officials.
Do you have a timeline, or you have any idea?
No, sir, the prediction would be after the new president is inaugurated.
Well, I'd say your chances are better then.
Possibly as soon as January 21st. Go to the next one. The Ocoee Middle School, we had originally budgeted $3 million. That came in at 1.75, and we were pleased by that. And we're finding some other things to save there as well. That's how we were able to transfer some money from that to the land purchase. And we're hoping when we complete that, we'll be able to transfer some more out. That is underway. Construction is underway, and we're projecting an August completion. Things are going smoothly so far. We're out of the ground, and most of the unknowns are taken care of. So that's going well. The next one. Hopewell Elementary School. Again, funding was approved by the County Commission late last year. We've completed the geotechnical investigation survey. We've basically completed all the due diligence, and schematic design is going to be presented to us next week by the architect. We're anticipating getting a GC on board in February of this year and starting construction late summer. Because that is a three-phased project, our goal is not to get to the end of construction documents and hard bid that project. What we want to do is, with the schematic design, we want to get a general contractor on board, a CM, construction manager at risk, which is the same thing we did at the Pie Center. We bid fee and general conditions as a competitive bid. We look at qualifications, fee and general conditions, and we make our selection. We get a contractor on board, and then that contractor can participate in the completion of the design and help us keep it in budget, help us with the logistics, and make sure that that schedule and lead times are not compromised. The other benefit to that is, by statute, the CM at risk type contract can be, you can change order the additional phases into it. So there's continuity there, and there's consistency in warranty and consistency in workmanship. So our goal would be to get a general contractor on board in February, complete the design and permitting this summer, and start construction late summer, early fall. On the first
Just a
phase.
quick, can I ask a quick question on
Yes, sir.
Hopewell? Because obviously, like you said, that was one that we did, or is by resolution. And in there, we put that, because I was concerned about the cash flow, that we couldn't really start paying any bills till January 1, a couple weeks ago. But from what I understand, you've incurred bills already. So did you pay for those and we're paying you back, or did you just absorb that cost and,
Yes.
and went move forward?
Ellen mentioned the reimbursements have already started flowing. That was for design, for survey, for geotechnical, for a lot of the due diligence preliminary work that had to be done.
So 189 is fun,
Yes.
is that, okay.
Yes.
Correct. And thank you. Parkview Elementary, the funding was approved by the Board of Education, and the County Commission approved the amendment. We're finished with the geotech. The survey is pending, and we have the architects under contract, and so design will commence within the month. And we're anticipating a general contractor bid on that one in September, and starting construction by the end of this year, by the end of 2025. Waterville Elementary School, this is the same note we had last time. The portables are complete, and we're kind of putting a placeholder on the expansion at Waterville, the proposed expansion on Waterville, and continuing to evaluate, do we want to expand Waterville, or do we want to build a new elementary school on the property that on Blue Springs Road that the school board already owns, and separate that student body instead of growing it further. So those discussions are ongoing.
When do you project possibility of those discussions ending?
Madam Chair, actually, the board has already, we know that they voted for Blue Springs, so we will bid that, and working with the commission, that could not start until 26, 27, I believe, is when that would start. But they've already said we would build. The question is, how, with the growth that we're seeing in that area, how many students can we download that will relieve Waterville, and then will they still have to build onto Waterville? That's really the question.
I don't see Blue Springs listed here on your expense or future expenses.
It's not going to be on there yet because we haven't done anything to predict what that would be, because we have to wait until that 26, 27 school year. So we'll be working on that this year.
There's a placeholder, if you want to pull that other one, that spreadsheet that you have there, Lori, pull that one up. There's a placeholder for a new elementary school on the south, a new elementary school on the north, and a new middle school on the north. So those are the last three line items on that bar chart.
What's the time frame you're asking for the new elementary on the south and north? Thinking, what time, what year, or when?
Speaking in general terms, there's nothing solid, but we would want to build Blue Springs first, because to relieve Waterville, we're actively looking at that north area for an appropriate land. So, and then the middle school should be reviewed as that population grows as well. But the first one would be Blue Springs, followed by the North End Elementary School. But we're also watching that population growth as well. But we also know we'll have to spread those out for funding purposes. So it would be Blue Springs, the North End Elementary School, and then the middle school. Or if the board makes a decision to go Blue Springs and then the middle school, and that would be a board decision.
Do you think 32 million is a good figure for an elementary school?
Yes, sir. Based on prevailing costs, I actually think pricing has kind of plateaued, and we're actually, I don't want to jinx it. Really don't want to jinx it. But we're seeing a stabilization in construction pricing.
I'm going to say you're probably looking at more like between 36 and 40.
That's my thinking too. So if we look at Blue Springs at say 40 million, okay, so we'd end up having to borrow what, 20 more? That'd be 60 million. We'd end up having to borrow.
Yeah.
And looking at tax rates and everything, that's probably a $2 million bill each year that we'd have to come up with. Do y'all have any suggestions where we might come up with that money?
Well, that's a commission.
That's going to be our
That's your
commission. I
decision.
knew what you were going to
That's
say.
your decision.
And so you're looking at, folks, 26, 27, you better tighten your britches up. And then you're looking at 27, 28, 28, 29 probably. So this figure of $156 million 8-year project for over the next 8 years, you think?
Does that have the middle school in it?
That has
Yes,
the
it has
school,
the
and
middle.
It has Waterville in it, which would come out.
Yeah.
So it'd be
Well,
130.
I'm going to correct on that. We anticipate Waterville coming out, but that area is really growing fast. So we still may have to do something at Waterville even after Blue Springs is built. It just may not be as critical as it was before the board made the decision for Blue Springs.
Mr. Blake, what's a penny worth now? 400,
No. I think it's what, 330, 335?
335?
Yeah, and we're getting ready to have the assessor do the appraisals here pretty soon, so it's around 330, right?
So you're looking at a pretty substantial tax increase. And I'm not, I guess I'm bringing bad news, but that's the only way I know that we can fund these places. If you have no other suggestions to raise money for the county.
I don't think I can sell enough candy to make that
I don't think anybody can sell enough candy for that figure.
Doctor, real quick on this one, because this is the first time I'm going to be a part of a new school. The ones we've done so far, Lake Forest was an existing that we overhauled, and the Pie Center was kind of quasi a new school, but
Right.
I think
Well-
you use. So what I'm talking about is the operation cost. So we'll build the school, fine, 40 million, but then you've got ongoing budget requirements with salaries, light bills and stuff like that.
All that
How
increases.
how do you go about
Well,
that?
at that point, you are looking at your budget and you're making those our budget, the general budget. We're making our forward predictions to see, what we have to increase, which in generally is going to decrease your fund balance. But as the same time, the if sales tax stay up, if the governor continues to increase the per student expenditures, you're hoping you're getting more money in. But yes, that's always a concern. You have to do that because you always have to have. Now, granted, some teachers will switch. Like when you build a new school and you're downloading all those kids, teachers come with them. But you still have the cost of administrative costs, office costs, cafeteria, those kind of things.
But that'll be in your budget request, not part of the bond issue, right?
Yes, that's true. Because that's recurring money.
So next year, 26, 27, you're looking at Blue Springs, right?
And it takes about 24 months to build a school.
So you figure if you're looking at 27, 28, are you looking at another elementary school, you think?
Yes, sir.
Then 28, 29, another elementary school?
I hope not. But that would be a middle school.
middle
You've
school.
gotta-
A middle
you've gotta do
school by
middle
then?
school. Yeah. And again, I make recommendations, but if the board decided they wanted to do the middle school before they did the second elementary, that would be a different look.
And you don't have any property on the north end? I thought
For elementary,
I thought you were looking at a piece
We
of
were
property.
looking at a piece of property. The offer that we made was not accepted. They wanted more than double of what we.
Standard.
Yeah. So we're continuing to look for property on the north end.
And you've got the property on Blue Springs already.
Yes, sir.
I had one other question. Your budget restrooms showed that you had going to have 14 million in your fund balance at the end of this year. Is that anticipated? That's what the budget said you'd have probably, Susan. Is
That would have been in our projection when we filed our budget, but we've done all these amendments since then, so that's no longer really accurate because we've done so much since July 1.
so how much money you think you're going to have at the end of this year in your fund balance that you might spend on other projects?
Well,
Yeah.
I can only give you historical numbers
I
because
understand. I'm not
it's
calling
too
you.
early.
I'm not asking for definites.
It's too early for us to start figuring that. It's almost time, but when you think about revenue runs like 2 months behind. So when you think about that, what we just got in January, that would have been for November or October. That would have been October. So you think about, we just now got October revenue, okay? So, but what I told you before, might adjust a little bit, and this is why I'm going to say this. If you remember, we kept coming in over budget on sales tax because we were really budgeting conservatively. And in those years, we typically, it was really close, that our revenue was, total revenue was coming in about $2 million over what we projected, and our expenditures were coming in under about $2 million. So 3 years ago, I could have probably said, you're probably looking at $3.5 to $4 million growing our fund balance. But if you look at what we did last year, our revenue was actually, it finally did settle out. And I think our revenue came in 1.1 million less than what we projected. Of course, our expenditures still came in way under. So we didn't grow it this past June 30 as much as we normally do. That has to do with the economy being so up and down, okay? We've been trying to predict. We were grossly under-predicting, and then it finally caught up. Does that make sense? So I'm going to, if I had to throw a number out there, because I'll be gone and you won't be able to fire me for giving you a bad number. But I mean, if I was just guessing, I'm going to say a typical year is going to be about a $3 million fund balance growth.
Madam,
Now that's
yeah,
been typical.
and Madam Chair, and remember, we don't have the full funding for Parkview, so that's the first place we would look, is that recurring money to go in to finish up that Parkview project.
If you look in the past, I'll say since the three of us have been working on this, we typically have tried to spend about $2.5 million on capital outlay, okay? And our go-to thing is we pay all of our capital outlay out of our fund balance growth, and then we use our recurring money to pay for payroll, benefits, utilities, all those recurring costs. That's an easy way to budget because you feel safe. It's one-time purchases. You don't have to, it's basically like we've been saving up and now we're going to spend it on that project. We're going to save up some more and spend it on that project. But because it's earmarked for a project, we don't have to worry about something happens to that recurring money and it doesn't grow. We've already got that project covered. And that to me is so smart of everybody that's involved in these decisions. It's smart to do business that way. I don't care if you're using your personal money or your school money. That's how I budget. And that's what we've done. And I feel like it's really, you look at when they're going over these projects, I'm just like blown away that all the things that we've been able to pay for. It blows my mind.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, we also use that rollover fund balance for roofing, paving, all of those things come out of that as well. So that's the first place we go. How much of this money can we move into that capital outlay for schools and for the district? Everything from replacing heating air units, paving, roofing, plumbing, all of those things are wrapped up into that. So when and we've been very fortunate, Susan's right, we've been very fortunate that we've had that fund balance roll so that we could roof everything and keep it going. We just finished roofing only a portion of Waterville. This next round we'll have to finish roofing that portion of Waterville as well. So we use that money for those things too, for the daily operations of maintenance.
I was just going to add to that $2.5 million number that I threw out there also includes the recommendations from all of our principals.
Yep.
We have a capital outlay committee that goes through, and that is also paid from that.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it, Susan. So is there any other business we need to discuss today? Communication from the audience. Anyone from the audience would like to stand and share any thoughts today? 1 second.
If you guys want to, at your pleasure, get on site with any of the projects that are currently going on, see their status, see where they're at. I would gladly be happy to have you call me and I'll drive you around and we can tour them and get through them. And that goes for all the commissioners.
Okay.
Would love to host you. Would love to be on site.
Thank you,
And
Kyle.
also when there are ribbon ceremonies for opening things, we'll send that to Lori and she'll send out an invitation to all of y'all as well.
All right.
I didn't know if you knew Dr. Hayes is with us today. She is our special ed director, and I just wanted you to know that I suggested heavily that she start coming to things, and so we appreciate her being here.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Hayes. Okay, Commissioner Winters?
Susan, is this your last meeting to present to us? How long have you been our chief financial officer? And where did you work before there?
So,
Where did you work
so
before there?
little story. I mean, I'll try to be quick. Paul Ramsey hired me to work at Bradley Junior High School, but I never worked for Paul Ramsey because that same summer, Paul actually retired, and Mr. Winters was promoted from assistant principal to principal.
Yeah.
So I worked for Mr. Winters for 1 year. Well, actually, the first year I got hired, so keep in mind I had a kindergartner. Now he has 2 children. I had a kindergartner, and I just wanted in the school system so I could be home with my kids more. And took a job working for Dana McClanahan as a guidance department secretary. I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely none. I did that for 1 year, and then they lost their bookkeeper. And Mr. Winters came to me and asked me, would I consider moving? And I said, Mr. Winters, I just now figured this guidance thing out. I don't want to move. And things rocked on. I had a couple people come to me that said, are you crazy? You need to do this.
Yeah.
And of course, having the degree and what I did, it made sense. One of the best decisions I ever made was moving to that bookkeeping office and working for you. And then that turned in an offer by Rick Smith to go to central office. And they got a new position, and I took that position. And I basically worked in every office down there. So it's been a journey, but it's been a wonderful journey. And I'm so thankful. I'll stop before I really get emotional. They caught me off guard, but I was thinking on the way over here, this is my last education committee meeting. I will be at a couple more commission meetings, but this will be my last education committee. And I will just say, as a whole, I could not have asked to be treated better by anybody. In this committee specifically, because you're also finance, you've just been amazing to work with. I feel like you're an extension of the school system. Instead of it being like this, I feel like it's like this. Not that we always agree, but I feel like when we disagree, that most of us are open-minded to know that the motive behind the disagreement is for the same thing. It's for students. It's for our community. It's for our county. And, you know, I've said many, many times when I've been up here, I work for the school system, but I'm a Bradley County resident too. And I have tried very hard to merge those two as fairly and honestly as I know how. I hope that has come across. But thank you so much for everything you've done for me, this county, and the school system.
Thank you, Susan. We appreciate your service. We are dismissed.